From Svitek comes a weekly digital series where he shares his insights, concepts, and findings learned during his 15-year journey of working in the entertainment industry. Each lesson offers you a roadmap to overcome the challenges that all artists face on the path to success. Welcome to a Svitek podcast.
Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 creative coach, and it's my pleasure to help creatives, such as you, master mental fortitude. Because it takes way more than just talent and luck to succeed in the entertainment industry. Now, what I mean by mastering mental fortitude is this notion of it's a mindset, it's grit, right? They call it mental toughness to be able to overcome life's obstacles as well as the creative process, because it can be arduous at times. And part of how I try to teach is to have various lessons, but also by introducing people that I know in my life that are doing some amazing things. And so in this episode, I am interviewing Fern Ronay, who I've known for a number of years through her work at AfterBuzz TV. And she's done various shows at the network, but at a certain point after knowing her for a couple of years, she approached me saying that she's coming out with a book. And we at AfterBuzz always love supporting the talent that we have. And so I was always on board of like, okay, how do we help? And what was cool about that experience is that I got to know a different side of Fern. And, you know, if you watch my vlogs and things of that nature, follow me, you know that I myself love fiction writing and am dabbling with myself. I just think it's another great creative form, creative outlet for any artist out there. And so in this particular episode, I break down the creative process with her in terms of writing. Now, if you're not an author yourself, a lot of these same techniques can apply to screenwriting or just the creative process in general. Like Fern's story, for example, she was in a different stage of life, different career path, and found that she was missing something creatively and shifted gears and has managed to combine the two. Unlike most people who would look at their life and say, oh, I've wasted X amount of years. No, she was able to take those parts and apply them to her new career of hosting and being an author, a podcaster, and so forth. So I think that's a great mindset. She always has this very positive spirit that I absolutely love. And what I love about the interview is that I learned a lot of things that I didn't know about the writing process, but also Fern herself. So I think she's a very interesting person. Now, so in particular, her first book, Better in the Morning, came out a couple of years ago, and I've had a chance to read that. And then the reason why we're doing this interview is she's coming out with her second book called Better Believe It, which isn't a direct sequel. It's more like a companion book to Better in the Morning, with the same primary character, but different side characters and different overall plot. I highly encourage you to check out her work just in general, whether it's the books, her podcast hosting. Like she does a plethora of various things in the entertainment industry. The best way to kind of keep in touch is she has a website, fernronay.com, or on social media at Fern Ronay. I will provide the links in the description box for ease for you. But without further ado, let's get to my amazing and wide-ranging interview with Fern Ronay. So welcome, Fern, to the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you for a number of reasons. I think you're multi-talented on a number of levels, but we're primarily talking about your second book. Mm-hmm. And I guess a natural sort of position to start with is, what was the difference of writing the first book versus the second book? Because a lot of artists will say this, the second time around is easy because you know it. Mm-hmm. Is it easy, or is it harder because now you're like, now I have to do it again?
Yeah, it's both. It's definitely easier because I learned so much writing the first book about pacing, about dialogue, about timing and scenes. So that part was easier. But I knew I had to tell this second story. I knew I had to write a second book, and it was daunting. Now I have to do it, like you said, I have to do it all over again. So I said to Howie the other day, I'm like, I don't know if I have a third book in me. Like, I need a break. I need some time. I'm going to work on other things. So it was daunting. It was hard. But it was easier in the respect of the mechanics. I knew what I was doing to a degree, so.
Awesome. And what was the second book more of an artistic inclination or an audience push, publisher push, or just a combination of all three?
Combination of all three. They're both standalone. It looks like a series because it's Better in the Morning and Better Believe It. And Better in the Morning is the story of Veronica. She's a single 29-year-old Manhattan lawyer who's guided in her dreams by her dead Italian grandparents. Better Believe It is the story of her best friend. So they're standalone. You don't have to read one and then the other. But I felt like,
help.
It does help. And I felt like Jada's story had to be told. So it was a combination of all those things.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much of this do you borrow versus fictionalize? And because I mean, I don't know. I feel like on the surface, the answer would be, well, it is kind of your life. But having done a similar thing, I sort of get asked the same question. I would say, like, in the end, it's only about like 20% of it is actual real life.
It's true. It's so funny because people think the first book and Veronica is based on me. She's a lawyer. She's Italian. She lives in New York City. She believes her grandparents are sending her signs. That's all me. But the rest of it, I'm like, it's a fiction. I made it up. Like, none of these things happened to me. Yes, she has this love interest who's a bald Jew, a Jewish guy. And if you know me, that's my husband. But everything else, no, like none of those things happened to me. I made it all up. It's fiction. A lot of people say, what does your dad think of the book? Because Veronica's dad is kind of a putz. The parents are divorced. I'm like, he doesn't think anything. He hasn't even read it, but he wouldn't be offended. It's not him. My parents have been married almost 50 years. It's not based on them. So it's not entirely based on me.
Yeah,
it's fiction.
And in that sense, like, was it just more fun to write something new? Or, because for me, it was like, well, real life, as fun as I think it might have been, is kind of really boring. So you have to dramatize it.
Exactly.
And then the more you do that over time, it's like, well, that's not really my life anymore. So
It's so true. People think that something funny that happens in real life will translate into a screenplay, a novel. Not always, and hardly ever. It has to be dramatic and funny enough to translate.
Yeah.
Just because it was funny in real life doesn't always mean it's going to be funny in the book.
And this writing inclination, let's go back to the first book, Better in the Morning. What did you grow up with a love of literature, and that's what kind of propelled you forward? Like,
No.
Where did this come from?
I majored in accounting. I never considered myself a creative person. I graduated, worked for Deloitte & Touche, got my CPA. Then I went to law school at Boston College, graduated, worked for a law firm, passed the bar. And then there came a time where I used to be, like I always say, I used to have such a high tolerance for boring material. Like the bar, the CPA exam, like give it to me. I can do it. I'm smart. I don't care how boring it is. Like I can crack it. And then I got to a point in my life where it was like my tolerance for boring material plummeted. And
is it because you consumed so much of it? Just
perhaps
religiously?
Perhaps I had my fill and I was like, I just can't do this. I remember, I worked in the World Financial Center in downtown Manhattan, being in a conference room and thinking, I can't do this for another 30 years. Like people say life is too short. Life is long too. Like I was like, I can't do this. And I started working with a career coach and I realized that my passion is people's stories and writing, and that's what I'm interested in. And I couldn't, even though I always considered myself not a creative person, I couldn't fight it anymore. And not to get too serious, but 6 weeks before my 30th birthday, my 21-year-old cousin died suddenly. She was in the hospital for a bladder infection. It came out of the blue. And you don't realize these things, how they affect you until some time has passed, and it deeply affected me and how I wanted to live the rest of my life.
I mean, I'm sure, reflecting back on the World Trade Center as well, like that's...
Yeah, I worked
that kind of gives you perspective as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. I worked for Deloitte right after college, and my first Christmas office party was at Windows on the World, which is not there anymore. And I was in Boston on September 11th. And I remember thinking, I was right there for 2 years, and it was personal, and it was very hard.
Yeah, no,
it affects you.
It does, and I don't know who it wouldn't affect, really. Mm-hmm. To that point, though, so you worked with a coach, and I always appreciate people who kind of know that they want to get to a point, but know that like they have greatness within them, but they also need guidance. Can you talk about that process of like, what was that? Like one day you just woke up and you're like, I just need some help.
Yes.
Google searched it. What?
Yes. That's exactly, and that's pretty much what happens in the book. So these things that come to you, I believe when you go to sleep at night, you can meet with spirit guides, loved ones on another plane. And when you wake up in the morning, you don't always remember it, but there's a reason things seem better in the morning. And then as you go through the day, these kind of thoughts come to you. They're not coming out of nowhere. You're being guided by greater forces. So if you have a gut feeling, if something's telling you to do something, you have to listen to it. Or one day you'll be in a conference room after passing the New York bar and the CPA exam and being like, I don't want to do this. You can't ignore what your gut's telling you. If you can't say I'm not a creative person, because someday it's going to catch up to you and you're just going to have to do these things. So I was working in New York, and I was like, I can't quit and become a writer. I have to do this slowly but surely. So I started taking writing classes at Media Bistro, which is, I remember I took intro to chick lit novel writing. And
what was the biggest takeaway from that?
It was so helpful because I didn't study writing formally before, so I didn't know the three arc format, the 3-act play format. Mm-hmm. I didn't know, how to make an outline, how to create an arc. I learned so much mechanical stuff in Intro to Chick Lit.
So they hooked you in with the boring.
They did. They
like,
did, but it helped. But to me, it was so interesting. I was like, I remember I had these characters in my head, Veronica and Sal and Antoinette. And then I remember hearing, we had to do our outline. We had to hand it out, and, people would talk about your characters. And it was so exciting to hear people talking about these characters that I made up. And
so it was partly a workshop, so there was an education component,
yes,
but you also, it wasn't just theoretical.
Yes, exactly. And I remember thinking, like, I can't believe people get to do this for real. Like, this is someone's job, is to create. That was so exciting to me. So that was the beginning.
Well, I also appreciate the fact that you looked at it from a practical standpoint, because there's also some people of like, okay, I want to go after my artistic dreams, and they'll stop everything and then just go after it. And even the people that do that, they understand like, okay, I might have to bartend to do it, but mm-hmm. there's still a level of reality check that has to happen mm-hmm. of like, I got to live a life.
Exactly.
So that's cool that you kind of had that foresight and all that. In terms of, I don't know, yeah, what was the feedback like on the outline, and how much did it change versus...
Very different.
Very different.
Yeah. So I didn't understand pacing. I didn't understand how to create a scene. I didn't understand, where certain things should go. I loved learning the 3-act play format. I feel like it opened up my world, but I still had a lot to learn. So it changed a lot.
Okay. And from that point on, like, what was, time-wise, your first draft? Mm-hmm. And how many drafts in general did it take from beginning to completion?
Like a million. I had a wonderful class. I think it was 8 women in this class in New York, and then I moved to Chicago, but we all kept in touch, and we're still in touch on Facebook, and we were exchanging pages for a while, and then that kind of died down, and then I found, thank God for social media and these groups I found online, so I would exchange, with beta readers, I would exchange the pages. Then I went to
Was it Zoetrope?
No, I can't remember how I found them.
Like, was it one of those where you revise 4 things and then they revise yours?
No, it
generally
was
that's how it works. Like, at least the ones that I've gotten, you revise more than you get, type of thing, which I think is a good model.
Yeah, I remember just exchanging with fellow authors, and we would just read each other's first 50 pages, and then we would decide to read more.
Got it.
Yeah, and just give feedback that way.
What was most of the feedback?
Most of the feedback, God, I feel like it was so long ago, but most of the feedback is usually the main thing I found is that the characters' actions aren't consistent with their thoughts, which is very frustrating for a reader. You never want the reader to think, why is she doing that? And sometimes it's hard to root for her. Some people are like, she's a lawyer. She works in New York. She complains too much.
The complaining aspect of it. So, well, let me ask you this: as far as the not matching actions, like, was it purpose? Like, when you kind of noticed that, it's like I should maybe lean into it because she is a walking contradiction, or you know what, this is not the way I'm intending it to be.
Yeah, it was not the way I was intending it to be. You want because the book is written in first person and you're inside her thoughts. You know what she's thinking and what she's struggling with. If there was a contradiction in actions, she has to recognize it for it to be satisfying, I think. And she has to, her actions have to be in line with what she's working toward her goal, whatever that is.
Yeah. And going into the second book, I mean, how much of that was kind of top of mind and were you able to address early on? And like, I imagine it's a faster process, but like a lot of the early drafts of the first book, you can kind of mesh into the first draft of this and not have to go through as many processes.
Yes, it was the learning process was so much more streamlined, so I didn't have those same struggles. The struggle with the second book was this character was the secondary character in the first book. So she kind of got all the funny lines. She got to be kind of bitchy. She got to be, it wasn't her story, so she kind of got to be the sidekick that was comic relief and
now you have to three-dimensionalize her?
Yes, she was a foil in the first book, and now she's has to be three-dimensionalized.
And how did you approach that?
It was hard because sometimes I couldn't understand her actions and where she came from, but then I found pieces of her that I could relate to. She doesn't have a lot of patience sometimes. We all have that, and I get where she was coming from with that. She feels misunderstood. That's something we can all relate to. I found characteristics that I could pull out and make relatable and make her story, like, why does she act like this?
Mm-hmm. Do you find, I know a big breakthrough for me was when I started to really love all my characters. And for you, you don't necessarily, I don't look at your books as having a true antagonist necessarily, whereas mine did, but I had to love my antagonist. Mm-hmm. So do you love all your characters equally?
No, it's so funny because in the first book, her boss and coworker were monsters, and at the end, monsters, they were just awful people. But I wanted them to be understood too, and at the end, I kind of had a backstory for the boss where she, has a horrible relationship with her husband. Ultimately, they have a terrible marriage. That's why she's at the office all the time. And the horrible coworker is caring for her mother who had Alzheimer's or something like that. And my editor was like, "It's too depressing. This is a chick lit book, and you don't have to go into that much detail about these secondary characters." But I wanted them to be understood. I feel like there's a need to want all of your characters to be understood, and it is kind of important because you don't want your characters to be so one-dimensional. But if they're secondary characters, it's a little more okay.
I want to talk, so chick lit, right? The genre of that. Heading into 2020, I just want to get your perspective of just even the phrase of it. I don't know, is that a positive thing? I don't know. As a man, I'm trying to learn.
They've been saying chick lit is dead for years, and that's fine. I think.
And what even on its core, what does that? What does it mean?
So there was a time when Bridget Jones and all of the Sophie Kinsella books, those were extremely popular. Emily Giffin, who's a former lawyer, she was always and still is kind of I look up to her. So there was a time when they were extremely popular, and then it kind of dipped, but there's still a market for it, and I can't write to what the market needs are. I can only write to what's in my soul, and in my soul, I describe my books as Sex and the City meets Ghost. Mm-hmm. I'm just, they're chick lit, they're women's fiction.
The market doesn't know a good book or a good movie, good music, ultimately that's what's going to win out. Everyone tries to formalize it, and then it becomes the second movie failed. It's like, well, yeah, because you tried to carve and copy it.
Right. What's authentic and what speaks to people will succeed. And if I think that my books, because they're these modern day stories with this element of spirituality, I just want people to know that if they believe that they're getting signs, they're not weird, they're not crazy. It's happened to me. It's happening to everyone, I believe. And if you recognize it, you'll recognize it. I don't want anyone to think they're crazy or weird or abnormal. This is a modern day tale of something that has a spiritual element that's very real. And I want the spiritual idea to be relatable and adapt and accessible.
Yeah. So how much of your planning goes into like thematic elements like that, motifs and metaphors, whatever else? Or you're like, you know what, I'm just trying to write.
No,
if it comes, it comes.
And not a lot, because the theme is already there. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes maybe people write and they're like trying to thread a theme through just to make it, to elevate it. The theme is already there, that we're on this earth as souls to learn and evolve, and everything we experience is just getting our soul closer to that, to evolving. And we're able to communicate in our dreams, which they're not really dreams, they're visits. We're able to communicate when we're awake through signs and symbols. And those are the themes that just naturally are in the book. And then, of course, with each character, what they have to learn. So Jada has so much to learn about, and so does Veronica.
Do you do research for your books? Like, I'm thinking, like, you know, just people like Jennifer Freed, maybe you've read some of her books, or like, I'm trying to think of like other people in this realm.
So particularly for the second book, Jada is unhappily married and has a son. I'm happily married, thank God, knock wood. And we're happily child-free. We don't want kids. So I'm like, how do I write an unhappily married mother? So I read a lot of the mommy blogs, and I read a lot of the anonymous comments, because in the anonymous comments are when people tell the truth of what's going on in their home, in their thoughts, in their life, that they married the wrong person, that they wish they never, that they had a child and they love their child, but their life will never be the same, and it's terrifying. Those thoughts, I think people aren't ready to share with their name attached to it.
The opposite of anonymous.
Yes.
Named, I guess. Would
yes.
Be I don't know what the term would be.
So those thoughts would never occur to me, but I realized that's Jada's struggle. Like, you know, so I had to do research to get into her mind in that way.
Mm-hmm. And was it just the blogs? That was your primary research? Was there any books or anything like that?
Yeah, no, primarily there's so much information out there. I mean, I love to read, and I love podcasts, and I love information gathering in general, but the anonymous and Reddit, that kind of stuff.
Got it. Interesting that you went that route, because you would think like the books are more boring, so you would have gone that route.
Yeah. I do love boring things.
No, that's really cool. And yeah, so I mean, we haven't really kind of talked about it, but like, just describe, like, it's the second book is primarily focused with the best friend. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, going a little bit deeper without giving obviously the story away. Mm-hmm. What else would you like to share with the audience? She
has a lot to learn about being compassionate to other people, particularly in her own family. So that's another thing she struggles with. It's not giving too much away, it's in the prologue, she always felt that her mother favored her sister, which I think is one of the most damaging things a human can experience. And I've witnessed it with people that I know, and that their inner child could still be hurt even as a successful lawyer. You know, by all accounts, it looks great on the outside, but they're still suffering from that insecurity and that hole in their heart. And that's something she struggles with.
Just observing it in real life, do you feel like almost the more successful someone is, the more pain they are? Like they're making up for something?
Maybe. I don't know. Because I know a lot of successful people I think are very well adjusted, and I know a lot of successful people who need help.
Are not well adjusted.
So I think it's split. Who knows?
Yeah.
But there is that kind of, you know, people have described me as an overachiever, and is there something that I'm trying to prove? That's something I'm still working on. I think I was for a long time, and then I realized what my true passions were and what I had to be pursuing in my life. So, I think, Yeah, I think that could be an element to it.
Going back to a thing that you mentioned, like with your first book, the editor said perhaps it's a little too depressing. Like it's chick lit. We gotta make it a little bit
Lighter.
What sort of notes were you getting on with the second book? Was it the same sort of stuff?
That the main character was unlikable. She was so harsh. I made her.
Do you take that personally? Because I mean, like if you imagine the main character is mostly like you.
Yeah, but you can't. It's so hard, but you have to take ego out of everything in life, and it's as hard as it is. You just have to say, I created this character, and she's not enjoyable for this reason to the reader. So she has to be tempered in a certain way, and it's business. It's not personal.
Yeah, well, having been on the receiving end of your notes too, what I appreciate, I feel like you've also understood how to give notes in such a way where it is actually constructive. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people use like the compliment sandwich, and I smell BS on that all day. But I don't know. I feel like maybe you're not conscious of it, but you've picked up a way to deliver notes with compassion and empathy, but also being direct of like, no, here's what you need to do versus like, it's all great.
Right. Okay, good.
Yeah. So
how's your book coming? Because I remember I read it last year.
It's hopefully the final revision.
Nice.
We're getting there.
Nice.
We're getting there. I got to.
Congratulations.
Well, it leads to a nice question, right? So one of the things, this is just in my mind. Mine's like 96,000 words, and I want to cut it down to 80,000 because I don't know. Just to me, a shorter length, like especially a first-time author, people are much more willing to pick up a book. Is it going to hurt the story? I don't know. I haven't fully cut out those words, but like, how conscious were you of just pure word count? Going back to the boring.
I think for the first draft, you're always conscious of word count because you're like, I'm halfway there. For your goal.
Well, and you're like counting up. Like, can I get to? Yes. Can I even write 50,000 words? Let alone all of a sudden I'm like 96,000 words. Why did I write so many?
I think the one of the drafts of Better Believe It was almost 90,000, and I think I got it down to 83. And I cut out a lot of stuff that in the second reading or the 200th reading felt like this isn't needed to move the story along. I think your instincts get better with every draft, and I think this is true for every writer, no matter what stage they're at. Your instincts just get better with every draft. So at that point, my instincts were telling me this isn't moving the story along, and you want to entertain on every page. So it's primarily scenes you were
taking out, or words?
Inner dialogue, backstory, and not whole scenes, but chunks of scenes that were not keeping the action going.
Was there a pattern of the types of scenes, or not sections of scenes? Like you said, like for example, you mentioned inner thoughts, so that's a pattern to me.
Yeah.
Were there others?
Yeah, backstory that at the time felt necessary, and then it could be cut.
Yeah.
Without risking understanding the main character or moving the story along.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, you also mentioned a third book.
I don't have it in me, not now. But not a third fiction book, but...
Do you have the idea?
Yeah, well, for a fiction book, I have perhaps an idea of 4 sisters who all meet with their mother, and then how it affects, at night in their dreams, and she sends them signs, and how they relate to each other in life. But I can't do it anytime in the...
Okay, so it seems like you're much more partial to maybe doing something nonfiction.
Yes, I would.
And what would that be?
I would love to compile a book of all stories of signs of celebrities. Because right or wrong, when a celebrity says that they experience this too, it validates it in some way, right or wrong. When Kim Kardashian said that when a bird comes to her, she feels like it's a sign from her father. And Emma Stone said on David Letterman that her grandfather sends her quarters. When people tell those stories, I think it normalizes it, which is what I want to do. I want to make these stories relatable and accessible and normalized, and you're not crazy or weird if you think this is happening to you. So I hope I do that with my books and with my podcast and I would love to do a nonfiction book compiling all of these stories.
Mm-hmm. And just from the standpoint of audience interaction. Like the cool part about you, you're not just an author, you're also a host, and so you get to connect with different audiences across different mediums. But I don't know how, in terms of like your fan base overall, like I don't know, what do you find your audience gravitating towards in terms of the work that you do?
I found that a lot of people, I'm so grateful to AfterBuzz. I'm so grateful to you guys. It's been amazing for me. And I still love every time I'm there. I just love the feeling of being there. And I love everyone that I meet who contacts me on Twitter or contacts me on Facebook or Instagram. And there are people who still recently, someone DM'd me and said, I used to watch you on Housewives of Beverly Hills with Megan and Chrissy and Grant. And,
I gotta imagine the Housewives in particular was a good training ground's the wrong word, but like a nice window into kind of just life of housewives in general, and being like, okay, I'm gonna piece certain elements into things.
It's so funny because they're at the core. You're just analyzing characters. So yes, and that's the other thing. I'm so grateful to AfterBuzz, because through AfterBuzz I met John Edward, and I was interviewed by him on his show, The Psychic Medium, and he said, he asked me about watching Housewives, and I was like, I just love characters. I love to analyze people. I love to analyze people's stories. I love to hear people's stories. So yeah, it was a great insight. And the fans of the AfterBuzz, fans of the Housewives after shows, translated into other things. We connect on social media. They have stories of signs. It does, just because you watch Housewives doesn't mean you're not, also have this aspect of your personality.
Yeah, I think for the most part, people who watch the Kardashians or the Housewives, they kind of know why they're watching it.
Yeah, they're pretty self-aware.
Yeah. Of like, I'm not watching it because I think it's grade A storytelling.
Right, exactly.
It's just a nice escape, ultimately.
Exactly.
Excellent. And so the second book has yet to come out, but it's coming out December 3rd.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I don't know, what do you hope the reception is going to be like? You mentioned it being okay for people to feel a certain way, but beyond that.
I just hope that I always said, whoever is meant to read these books will be led to them somehow. I hope if you're listening and you've experienced signs and you want to tell someone, tell me. We talk about purpose. What's my purpose? My purpose is to listen. I think I'm a great listener, if I do say so. I love to hear people's stories. And if you have no one that you can tell in your life that like, this happened to me, I don't know if it's a weird coincidence, or I don't know if it's a message of some sort, and you have no one to tell, DM me, tell me. I want to hear everyone's stories. Listen to my podcast, join my private Facebook group. You're not alone.
What's the private Facebook group?
It's called Believers in Signs.
Excellent.
Pretty on the nose. So what I hope to gain is they enjoy the books, they're entertained, they laugh, they feel something, and it makes these stories accessible.
And just trying to channel the power of laws of attraction. If this were a movie, who do you see playing who? In an ideal cast. And by the way, we can plus or minus this like 20 years. You could say like, Sarah Jessica Parker from 10 years ago, but this person from now, whatever it may be.
If perhaps a treatment was prepared and there was a casting of, the grandfather and grandmother in the first book in Better in the Morning, I always envisioned Paul Sorvino maybe 10 years ago. Olympia Dukakis maybe 10 years ago. I don't know now, maybe Lainey Kazan. And for I love Danny DeVito. For the main character of Veronica, I don't know. There's so many people that it could be. Mm-hmm. Who is our main?
We're trying to channel the spirits.
Yes.
To give us the answer.
Tell me, who was it? Who was on the page for Veronica? I can't remember. But I had the grandparents down for sure.
All right. Well, that's cool. And any final thoughts, like to the audience, just in general, while you have the moment?
Yeah, just find me. You're not alone. You're listening to this particular episode
Social
for a
media
reason.
at Fern Ronay, everything.
Yeah, everything's at Fern Ronay, Ronay. And just find me, and I'd love to hear your stories, and I'd love to hear from you in general. Yeah,
Awesome.
and I'm so grateful to you, Phil. Honestly,
Thank
when my first book came out, you worked so hard at AfterBuzz, and Saturday was your day off, and I will never forget I had a book release party at AfterBuzz at the studio, and you came in on your day off. You got the whole studio set up. You put all the furniture away. You took care of everything, and I will never forget that, and I was so grateful. And you've been so helpful in so many other ways.
I appreciate that. I know what a monumentous thing it is to put out a work of art, and I think that's that's the other thing for me. Like with my show, I try to inspire people, and when you open up about your journey of you weren't happy artistically, and then dove into this, and the fact that now this is your second book, and you might take a break from fiction, write some nonfiction. To most, that's not a break. No, that's amazing, and I wish you the best in your continued adventures. And yeah, I love to brag about my friends, so I will continue doing that.
Oh, thank you. Same, right back. Thank
you so much.
Thank you for watching my interview with Fern Ronay. I hope you have benefited from it as much as I have. It was truly fantastic getting to know her, but also the lessons and the takeaways there. I truly, truly appreciated getting that time with her, and I wish we could have gotten even more. And I'm sure in the future we will. In the meantime, that does it for this episode, but I encourage you to check out other episodes. You can find them at philsvitek.com, or you can just subscribe to this right now, so that way you'll be notified when new lessons come out. Also, if you prefer to learn by reading, well, I've taken my various lessons and put them in a course book. So not only do you get the lessons in written form, but you also get to put them into practice because, again, it's a course. So it's 35 jam-packed lessons in a workbook that I call Master Mental Fortitude. You can check that out at mastermentalfortitude.com. And I have to give a huge shout out to the people that helped make this episode financially possible. Thank you. If you too would like to support this show, you can do so by going over to my Patreon page or supporting some of my merch. Both links are provided down below. Or you can simply just tell a friend or leave a review on the platform you're on right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.